Thanks for joining us here at Rose Quartz Mediumship Podcast, where we simply adore anything and everything healing and metaphysically based. Relatively recently, I was in a somatic training, and as part of the training, we were watching a video about a polar bear. And the point of the video was to watch how a mammal will process and deal with shock as they're coming out of it. And the video was playing. I was in the class, and I had an enormous reaction. And I want to say I'm super connected to animals, but it wasn't like the display of what the animal was demonstrating was shocking to me. I've grown up on a farm. I've watched a lot of animals be a mammal, and I assisted with, was involved with, and witnessed many, many, many animals give birth. And many, many animals deal with various different forms of trauma. So the actual visual display of how the mammalian nervous system deals with shock was not shocking to me. The part that was so intense for me is that it triggered a memory that I knew about but had not processed. And I was sitting in the class and realized that I was having a really intense reaction. My body became very tight. My chest became very heavy. I felt like I was having a hard time breathing, knowing that I wasn't. And the rest of me was fairly still. But the inner sensations that were happening in my chest were undeniable. And I was having a hard time with being able to feel them and allow them to release. I was feeling them, and they just kept getting more and more intense. After the video was done, the class started discussing stuff. The instructor was working with a couple of the other students, and I realized I needed to step away, which was a flight response. So I got up, took a couple steps away from my computer, and realized that I felt really dizzy. And then I felt really nauseous. And then I thought I was going to pass out. And as I was walking, I was like, I better go to the bathroom in the event that I throw up. Started walking towards the bathroom, stopped, held the wall, went into the bathroom. Everything kind of calmed down. And then all of a sudden, it all stopped. Literally, it all stopped. And I had the weirdest sensation roll over me. It was like I was so in the emotions of this memory. And I will pause in a second and tell you what the memory was. And there were a lot of emotions that went with it. But in a split second, like that, everything stopped. The sensations inside of my body, the emotions that were coming through, everything stopped. And so I returned to the class, sat down in front of my computer, and as I sat there, I realized I was not absorbing anything that was happening inside the course. I was watching, I could hear the instructor teaching, but none of it was landing. And I'm somebody who loves learning. Like, I have a genuine love of learning, and it's a multisensory experience for me. So even though I'm hearing something, there's a lot that is happening inside of my body and inside of my imagination channel. The inner sensation channels are really intense. I'm having an emotional reaction. It is a multi-sensory experience for me when I learn. And so frequently, I will learn something in a class, and then for days, I will work with it conceptually, somatically, in all sorts of various different ways. But I recognized that I was sitting there and it was like I was completely numb. Completely numb. Not only was I not absorbing what the instructor was saying, I could hear her talking, but it was like there were words, but nothing was landing for me. It felt like it was a million miles away. I literally was like, it's a ways away from me, and I did not care. I did not care. Now, this is a course that is really, really important to me. Something that I am really passionate about. It's a somatic course with Somatic Experiencing International. It is something I'm really passionate about. I paid a lot of money. I was really excited. There were a lot of things that needed to happen in order for me to be able to be present for this course. And I could not care less. I mean, I did not care that I was missing hours of content. I just sat there completely numb. I knew that I was disassociated. I knew that I was having a freeze response, but there was no part of me that could do anything about it. I wanted to. There was this little desire of like, hey, you paid a lot of money for this. You might want to learn it. It's not a course that's being recorded, so you can't watch the replay, cupcake. And then the majority of me didn't care. I literally could not access even a smidgen of caring. And so the afternoon went on, and I sat there in a very, very disassociated state. I was not looking around the screen. I was not really absorbing and hearing what the instructor was saying. There were moments where I closed my eyes. Nothing worked. And it wasn't until later when we were doing practice sessions on each other as part of the training. And we were meant to work on something that was small, something that was a little bit triggering. And there were mentors or assistants who were in the breakout rooms with us in Zoom. The mentors were in there supporting the students who were doing demonstrations on each other, practice sessions on each other. And I said, I just want to be fully transparent. This is where I'm at. I am clearly in a freeze response. And I will think of something small, but I just want to be transparent that I may dip into this other experience. Now, I'll pause and tell you the experience that was so triggering for me. When I was a teenager, I had a surgery, and the anesthesia that they used, we were given the option of me being put fully under or being kind of between worlds, right? A little bit awake. At the time, the medication was called MAC. And that was the option that we picked. And went into the surgery, was feeling really good about the surgery, was really confident in the surgeon, met the anesthesiologist, did the things, right? Went into surgery, and as the surgery started, I kind of faded away, and then all of a sudden I could feel cutting, and I could smell flesh burning. And I can vividly remember opening my eyes and saying, I can feel that. And there were multiple people in the surgery, obviously, who stopped. Everything stopped. It was like you could have heard a pin drop in the room. And the anesthesiologist leaned in kind of close to me and said, you can feel what? And I said, the cutting. I don't like the way that the cutting feels. And I watched the anesthesiologist turn and look at the surgeon, and then a mask was put over my face. And I was out for surgery. No memory of surgery after that kind of waking up event. When I woke up from surgery, And I think that this is probably due to the fact that they wanted to make sure that I was under. They had obviously switched anesthesiology techniques or medications that were being utilized during the surgery. I woke up flailing. And when I say flailing, I mean absolutely flailing. I was kicking, I was yelling, I was grabbing, I was screaming. I was telling them that I needed to go pee, and they kept putting a bedpan underneath me, and then I was confused about why a bedpan was underneath me because it hurt, and so I would take it out and I would throw it across the room. It was not a very good expression of me. They brought my parents in, and actually, I'll pause. There's a little freezy moment happening for me. As I was waking up from surgery, there was a lot of flailing that was happening. And I can remember saying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. And again, this was just the anesthesia leaving my body and my body not reacting well to it. And I was grabbing at people, at things. I legitimately felt like I could not breathe, could not get air. And I can remember the anesthesiologist having this very long needle and holding it up, even though I couldn't see everything because there was a drape in front of me. I remember watching this very long, very big needle come up, and the anesthesiologist squirting a little bit of the fluid and then putting it into my leg. And I said, ow! And then I was out again. And then the second time I woke up, it was a little bit of the same. Only this time I wasn't grabbing for people. I wasn't reaching at people. I wasn't screaming in this same kind of way. So I woke up, I was a little bit calmer. I was not having a hard time breathing. It was still flailing. So my arms and legs were going. My whole body was thrashing. And they tried everything, right? I said I had to pee. They put the bedpan underneath me. I threw it across the room. Those poor medical staff that were in there, bless their hearts, because I was truly not a very good expression of me. They eventually went and got my parents because they couldn't calm me down, and my dad tried to talk to me, which didn't work. And ultimately, they did give me a little bit of something. I was sedated again, and the next time that I came to, it was a much more peaceful experience. And when my parents came back that time, I told them that I had had a really hard time breathing and that they had knocked me back out. And my parents said, no, I'm sure that was just confusion. You were probably seeing things in the room. And I pulled the Johnny up on my thigh, and there was a needle mark with blood. And my parents were like, oh. Oh, this was a not smooth surgery. And at the end of the day, I know without a doubt that medical staff did the best thing for me. And ultimately I was safe. And I lived through the surgery, and there were no major issues. And there's no part of me that holds any sort of resentment or anger or frustration towards the medical staff. They were loving and caring and gentle and kind the entire process. And there's something about me that didn't react well to that medication. And I'd never had surgery before, and no one would know. And they did the best for me. But what came up when I was watching the polar bear video was my memory of reaching and grabbing for people and thrashing and trying to get away from what was happening, and the absolute flailing that came out of me. And that's what the polar bear was doing as the polar bear was moving through the shock of this experience. And so it triggered that memory for me, even though I consciously had awareness that this is something I'd been through. It triggered something very different in me. And so when we were doing the practice sessions on each other, and I won't tell all the details, but long story short, the individual who's facilitating me did a really, really phenomenal job. And while we tried to steer towards something different, the freeze response that was so present in my nervous system wouldn't allow for that. And I was really disassociated through the entire session until I found some safety. And the facilitator, the student who was facilitating me, did an amazing, amazing job. And when I was able to access just a little bit of safety inside of my body, I went from the freeze response that I'd been in to an enormous discharge or purge of the shock that had been held in my nervous system ever since that surgery. And what I can say is that the emotional release that came out of me, I hysterically cried, I shook like crazy, I had snot running down my face, I was yawning, I was taking spontaneous deep breaths, I kind of did it all, I sweat like crazy. For about 20 minutes after the session, I had stripped down into a tank top, and even at that, I was absolutely dying. I was so hot. My body was just releasing a massive amount of heat. And then I was able to connect to myself again. And it gave me a whole new level of respect for how the nervous system will protect us when something is too much. When I was in the middle of that experience of reprocessing the trauma that I'd been through with waking up during surgery, watching that video, and my nervous system understood that it was too much. And that off switch that was hit when I went into the bathroom and everything stopped. All the sensations, all the emotions, everything, that was my nervous system's way of protecting me. And it's a form of freeze energy, which I consciously knew. I had awareness that I was in freeze, but could not get out of it until the somatic session. But the respect that it gave me for what it feels like to be in that kind of a freeze. And I only had to experience it for hours. I was so disconnected from myself. I was so disconnected from everything that was important to me, that I love, that I care about. I could have cared less about what was happening in my reality. I couldn't access sensations inside of my body, could not feel my body at all. I could not access my emotions. Nothing. I went from, 10 out of 10 sensations and emotions to nothing in a split second. And while that experience was intense, and there were parts of it that were certainly uncomfortable, it gave me a totally different level of respect and understanding of the freeze response that can happen in the nervous system. And that evening, as I was reflecting in meditation, I was thinking about all of the people out there who are in a chronic state of disassociation or freeze. Now, this is different than the kind of like disassociation that happens for us in moments or little blips. I'm talking about people who live in disassociation or freeze, a form of a functional freeze. And that's the way that they move through the world. And my heart broke so intensely because I know what it was like for me for a couple of hours. And just thinking about how there are people who move, and a lot of people who move through this world, unable to access their body, their sensations, their emotions. The disconnect that I felt from myself and the outside world was enormous. And my heart broke for people who have that lived experience. And I think that there are some people who don't even realize that there's anything but that because they have been in a functional freeze for so long. And it gave me an entirely different level of love and passion and respect for the power of somatics. Because in a 20-minute session, it changed everything. Not only was I able to discharge or purge that trauma, that shock out of my nervous system from the surgery, and I will say it created so much capacity and freedom and lightness inside of my nervous system. I began to see things differently. I began to physically see my environment differently. Colors seemed brighter. Everything was magical. It gave me a profound love, as if I didn't already have a profound love, but a different level of love for somatics. And I thought it was really important to share this story, because I think that there are a lot of people out there who are walking around completely disassociated from themselves and the world around them. And some of those people don't even know anything else. And I wanted to tell this story because I think it's important. And if you're listening and you are somebody who is in a deep state of disassociation or freeze, or you know someone, you have a loved one, I just want you to know that there are so many somatic practitioners out there who can help you through that. I can help you to access yourself and this beautiful life that we get to live. I hope that wherever it is that this podcast is finding you, that you are having a beautiful morning, day, evening, or night.